So I'm going to call this series. I want this to be a series, 2 albums in a year. And today I'm going to start it out with a really pivotal year for me, for a lot of people, I think. We're talking about the mid 90s. 1995 is the year. And there's two bands that came onto my radar and changed things, and now I think are regarded as two of the most important bands of the 90s. They were two bands that you could count on coming to town every year, playing to, like I lived in Minneapolis, so playing at a venue like First Avenue, you could get a ticket. You could probably buy one the day of the show. I think I've got comps for some of these bands, seen them live. And they put out a record every year. So there was a lot of anticipation of what the next record was going to sound like. And both of them were on independent labels, and you kind of wondered if they were going to go for it or what that next record was going to sound like. I'm talking about Guided by Voices, and I'm talking about Pavement. My introduction to Guided by Voices is a great one, I think, with one of my favorite stories. I had heard Vampire and Titus, a few seconds of it. I couldn't stand it. I was working for a record label, and I quickly took it out of the CD boombox. It was noisy. I still don't like that record. I know there's good songs in it, but the production, it's just awful. I don't like it. Don't start there if you're new to Guided by Voices. Sorry, my cat is like climbing in the back of my laptop here. But my introduction to Guided by Voices, my real introduction, was I subscribed to CMJ magazine, and they put out a CMJ sampler every month, and I got it in the mail, and I had one song from Alien Lane's Motor Away, which was a new record at the time, and a song called Squirmish Frontal Room from Box, which was a box set of four earlier records and a disc of outtakes or extra songs. The song Motor Away off Alien Lanes, I loved. Ear Candy, just guitar, just like this real catchy song. I love the sound of it. I wanted more. On the other hand, I couldn't stand Squirmish Frontal Room. It sounded like what I'd heard off Vampire and Titus, and I didn't like it at all. I went out for breakfast the next day with a friend, and I went to the record store with her, and I ended up buying Alien Lanes. And I remember saying, if I like this album, I'm going to go see them tonight, because they're playing at the Uptown Bar, which is a super small place. We go there for breakfast. And they were playing there. They would book shows. It's great. It's a legendary place in Minneapolis. Bob Stinson and Tommy Stinson of the Replacements. Their mother worked there for a long time. Probably another episode. Could talk all day about the 400, or about, I keep saying 400 bar, the Uptown Bar. I remember asking my friend, because I listened to the album and I loved it. I was like, "Do you want to go?" And she's like, "No." I'm like, "No, okay." And I couldn't get anybody to go because, yeah, I made up my mind right away. I love that album from the first few seconds, and I'm like, I'm gonna go see this band. And it might have been like a Sunday night or something. It just seemed like nobody really wanted to go out. And some of the best shows I've ever seen in my life, I just go by myself. And oh my God, that was one of them. And it's funny, a lot of friends that got into them later, like, just jealous, that I saw that show. But it was so good, and it was just so refreshing. It was just a band rocking out. They were playing like they were the Who up on stage. They get compared to them all the time. I mean, he's twirling his microphone like Roger Daltrey. He's doing the jump kicks. They've got a cooler of beer up there. They're smoking cigarettes. They're just there to just rock out and in a great way and carry us on that journey. And it was just so cool. I mean, the guy's a school teacher, had been teaching for years, had put out like 6 records at that point and was about to give up. And then they start getting all this attention. And Alien Lanes is a great album. You have to kind of surrender to the production values. Even when I bought it on vinyl recently, after having it on CD for years and maybe not listening in a while, I was like, oh man, I wasn't really, it took me back. It wasn't quite as good as I remembered it. Maybe it is the vinyl pressing, but I've listened to it since, and it sounds fine. But it is, if you're into that world, or if you can get into that world, it's incredible. And I would encourage anybody who doesn't know it to listen to it like it's a mixtape too. Let it play. If I know we're not really in a CD era too much anymore, but if you were to have it on CD, it would be the last album you'd ever want to hit shuffle on. It wouldn't make any sense. It'd be chaos. It's sequenced in a way where those little fragments all make sense. And it's a great, great, great album. Alien Lanes. The other band that I want to talk about is Pavement. They came out at the pretty much the same time. I mean, a little bit earlier. They got commercial attention, or I shouldn't say commercial attention, but press earlier than Guided by Voices did. Slanted and Enchanted, I think, came out in like '92, and they had some EPs and were on a lot of music fans' radar before then. But the album that got on my radar was Crooked Rain, Crooked Rain. It came out in 1994. It took what they started with on those early EPs, and especially Slanted and Enchanted, and built on it, and it made more of a pop record, more of a hooky rock record, and I absolutely loved it. I remember thinking, this is it. This is a perfect like rock record. This is the model. Like this, I loved it. I played it all the time. Okay, I wore it out, and with both bands, you know, there were sort of this what's their next record going to be? Are they going to go to the next level? Are they going to get a producer? You know, and like if you're in the indie world and you're listening to these bands, and you used to see them at small clubs, and you could count on these bands coming through every single year, right? And putting on an album every year. You don't want to like all of a sudden have them like be an arena act. That'd be ridiculous. But you know, Guided by Voices acted like they were one, and Pavement sort of had the songs like they could, if they really wanted to, maybe cross over and be a bigger band. So with Pavement, I didn't want them to like go play arenas. That's ridiculous. Although I think they could have I think they could have. I wanted them to get a producer, or maybe not even the right producer, but just focus, and make a killer follow up to Crooked Rain, Crooked Rain. I knew they could do it. There was a certain buzz about it. I remember other musicians talking about it. I remember Gary Loris of the Jayhawks saying he wished they would take things a little bit more seriously because they could be an absolutely incredible band. They were an incredible band, but I agree, that follow-up could have been absolutely amazing. On the flip side, Guided by Voices, it was like your little secret, and they were so good. Like you didn't, I don't know. I think I got a little excited later on when they got Rick Ocasek as a producer of what it could be. But you also they were like this little gang, and you didn't want them to get too big. And I never saw them as putting out a stone cold pop masterpiece the way that I quite saw Pavement. I think with them it was more just delivering like kick-ass rock and roll records over and over, which they continue to do to this day. I mean, they overwhelm you with material. They've broken up, they got back together. They have a really solid lineup right now, and if you get a chance, go see them live. They're incredible. You can kind of see they're pretty much the same band, different players, somewhat. Different players since the early days. But that reunion, called the Classic GBV, reunited in the early 2000s, and I don't think those records or that live experience was quite as good as what you'll see now. They've got a very solid lineup. But it's interesting. You look at Pavement, and they have turned into that legacy act, almost like they had a big hit. They reunite about every 10 years. They play festivals. I think they're currently on a tour. But they didn't make that follow-up that I wanted them to. They seem like the band that could and didn't. And I know ruffle some feathers that way for sure. But I wanted Wowie Zowie to be a completely different record than it is. It's like a glorious mess of a mixtape. I mean, in a way, I called Alien Lanes a mixtape, but that sustains a mood really nicely. Wowie Zowie just seems like it's kind of half written and all over the place, and I don't know what they were really going for on that record, but it wasn't what I wanted. I think it was maybe they didn't want to. Maybe they were freaked out by going any further into the mainstream or whatever. And again, it's not like I necessarily wanted them to do that. I just thought they were capable of a really, really, really good follow-up to that. And then they made two more records, Terror Twilight or Brighten the Corners, and then Terror Twilight, which became increasingly more like a Stephen Malkmus solo project, but still really good records, but not to the level of singles, yeah, but not to the level of Crooked Rain, Crooked Rain. It was just like brimming with overflowing with potential. And so yeah, it's interesting all these years later. I still have Guided by Voices. I listen to everything they put out. I'll buy some of them. It's a little too overwhelming, but generally it's like just as I'm getting into one album, another one comes out, and then I forget about the last two, and then I see them live, and I'm like, oh yeah, oh wow, these things are familiar, and then I realize, oh, they've got like a running greatest hits with all these things they keep putting out. I have almost no interest in Pavement, which I find really strange. Maybe it's because there's been no new material. I tend to not be too excited about reunion tours that go on too long without new material. It was that way with the Pixies too. And then when they finally started putting out new material, it left me cold. I mean, some of those records are okay if you forget about the first 4 studio records, 5 if you count Come On Pilgrim. But they're just a different band to me. And I feel like Pavement would be that way too. Although I'm sure if I went, I would probably love it. But 2 very pivotal bands. I think a lot of times you get the Guided by Voices versus Pavement, almost like the Stones versus the Beatles arguments in indie rock circles, talking about the 90s then and maybe to some extent now. But I think it's just really interesting how we look at these bands all these years later. Guided by Voices are going to come to your town. They're going to play a small place. It'll be a lot of fun. Squint your eyes. They'll look like they're 35 again. Pavement, you're going to be sitting up higher in some theater, hopefully, but maybe someplace bigger. And I would imagine it's a bit more of a professional show, but I could be wrong. But yeah, both albums are great. In my mind, those are the two to start with. And they're my 2 favorites, Crooked Rain from Pavement and Alien Lanes from Guided by Voices. So that's 1995, 2 artists in a year. And thanks a lot. See you next time.